Hello malty mash bill maniacs. Thank you to Jacob Crater for the malt mention introducing and extras. 909 extras. I'm Ralphie here in the bothy. I've tidied it up a little bit to make it look a little bit spring cleaned. It's got that spring clean look, except I haven't got round to cleaning down the walls, but I will give them a nice brush of whitewash at some point in the future, but not just for the moment, because I'm busy reviewing whisky, which is the primary purpose of this channel, Ralphie.com. Just in the off chance that you haven't already subscribed, please do. Click likey and all the rest of it. Show a little bit of support for my content, and in doing so, more people will become aware of it. And something I'd like you to be aware of is batch differences. This is the topic of my review at the moment, because I voted Ledaig 10-year-old single malt whisky to be my whisky of the year for 2022. But not that long ago, I previously bought a bottle, which is what made my mind up about making it my whisky for the year. And I reviewed that, but I've never finished it because I rarely do. And I'm in a position to actually compare the two whiskies side by side and show you, from my perspective, the slight batch variations that you can get. Now, there's two types of batch variations with any whisky. And we'll start with the one that we absolutely don't want, and that is the bad batch variation, where you've bought a whisky, really enjoyed it, and you go back maybe a few months later or a year later or several years later to buy a second bottle, and when you pour it, it's not the same as the first bottle. And I don't mean that as a compliment. The fact is that, in your opinion, going and judging on your smell and taste experience, you can just tell almost immediately that the quality is not what it used to be, and therefore you feel disappointed. And even if it's a very slight deterioration in quality, you still feel you've been cheated, and that emotion actually can turn you against the whisky to read more negatively into it than it actually perhaps deserves. Perhaps you just need to give it more time, breathing a little bit, and give it more time to oxygenate and just kind of settle down. But I'm going to do a straight comparison between the last Ledaig I reviewed last year, I believe, or the year before, and this one, which I've only just reviewed recently, very recently, because they're both different whiskies. And this is the second type of batch variation, where the flavours changed slightly, but the quality is just as good. Now, in the previous version, we'll call this the 2021 batch. As soon as you nose it, and I'm going to add a wee drop of water, bear with me, I want them to be absolutely the same, and I've already added 2 millilitres of water to this glass for my most recent review, so I'm going to add the same again. To the whisky I previously reviewed. So there they are, sitting comfortably. Before I tackle the whiskies, you might not be able to make it out, but I'm going to bring the cardboard boxes forward. You can see they're basically identical, but there's a different shade of colour in the top of the boxes. This is darker and this is lighter. You see that? Well, I can see it in my camera monitor, so you can probably pick it up yourself. And you have essentially the same container, but it's a different printing run, so they're very slight difference, and this is actually quite common, nothing to worry about. When you look at the containers, you cannot use any slight changes as a point of reference for judging the contents of the bottle, because quite literally you can have a change in the different colours or tones of a similar container, even for the same batch of whisky. The bottling plant, it depends how quickly they run out of the old containers and bring in the newer batch of containers, which you're never going to notice unless you've got the two sitting side by side, which for the majority of whisky drinkers is certainly the case. But you may pick up, being a proper malt mate and an anorak, you may pick up on this. Nothing to worry about. It's really the contents of the bottle. That's what we're paying for. The smell and the taste. Now in the older version, it's fruitier in the nose. It's distinctively more red fruit on the nose, almost like a touch of cranberries in there. And I suspect that is because this batch has been made up, including casks of Ledaig which have matured either in port casks or red wine casks or both. Bear in mind, many distilleries are using a whole array of casks, not necessarily sticking to 100% bourbon or 60% bourbon, 40% sherry. You get all these permutations, but in amongst them, distilleries, if they get the option at a reasonable price to be able to buy some sound, solid casks, they're going to jump in and buy them, because good quality casks are not available 100% of the time for many distilleries. They've got to buy as and when they come on the market and they have the opportunity. And naturally they're going to, if they've got a good cask, they're going to use it. But when they go to that cask, they're saying, hang about, this is a distinctly different version from our house style. So either we bottle it as a single cask, or a distillery only bottling, or we bottle it as a small limited edition, or we simply leave it more years in the cask, because as an older whisky there'll be a smaller batch and we can use it to give it more of a definitive identity. But for younger whisky, what they'll do is they'll say, I tell you what, we've got a good whisky here, but if we shove in 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe a dozen casks from the red wine rack or the port rack, where they've got the port casks lined up in the warehouse, then they're going to richen up the flavour of a particular batch if they feel they need it. And once you've noticed it, you're very much aware of it. It's certainly, I gave this 90 out of 100. There's the mark there. Because that red fruit, red currant, cranberry note that was in, it just added that little touch of extra that gave it more singularity, and I really enjoyed it. It added a bit of additional character to the Ledaig, and when you taste it, right up in the front in the arrival, ooh, sure, the big blast of peat, delicious, rounded, beautifully sweet and sour. That rich raisiny note that backs it all up is part of the signature from Tobermory Distillery. But there's that red fruit runs through it. It's discreet, it's restrained, it's absolutely delicious. It just kicks that malt up that extra single point. When we come to the most recent bottle that I've bought, and I tell you what, I'm going to bring the bottles forward and see if you can see any difference in the colour. Excuse me, there we go. I'll turn it right round. It's marginal, but it's there. Slight difference in colour. with the latest batch of Lechaik. I've scored it 1 point down, but it's still a damn good top drawer single malt whisky and great value for the money so long as you're not overpaying. That red fruit note is just not there, but because of its absence, the peatiness in the dram is that bit more assertive because there's less additional activity from other flavour contributors. In this case, the either port or red wine or both influence, and therefore the smokiness of the peat is a little bit more transparent. And something that jumps out is the peaty tanginess is more prominent in this batch than it is in this batch. So it's a trade-off. Something is gained here from that red fruit contributor that isn't in this one, but it doesn't matter because they're both absolutely fantastic. I hope you found this useful and helpful, and all the rest of it, malt mates. And if you enjoy the content, leave a comment. I really appreciate your comments. I scroll through the comments and I leave you a little Ralphie heart most of the time when I can actually keep up with all the... I've had a real flurry of activity in December. I always do with my content. And I've been struggling to, it's taken me hours actually to read through all the comments and just leave my little Ralphie heart. So if I've missed you out, I apologise for that. Hopefully I'll get you next time, malt mates. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this useful. I'm not going to bump on too much about it. I'm really taking this opportunity to introduce batch variation to you rather than deep diving about it. Something that I'm more inclined to do perhaps as a live stream in my Patreon channel. And if you fancy subscribing, all you have to do is buy Ralphie a dram, and then you'll get some additional content, including an extra video every week on my Patreon channel. So hopefully we'll see you there. In the meantime, you look after yourself. These are difficult times around the planet. What with one thing and another, and we all need a little bit of room just to step aside, relax, chill out and enjoy our own space. And that is what the Malt Moments are all about. Thanks for watching now.